Previously, a lady called Ella Hill contacted us and wanted to publish an open letter to response to the Home Office. She's a victim of the grooming gangs, I believe, in Rotherham, and is now, out there being an activist of trying to, find ways to stop that sort of thing and to hinder their crimes. So this was the open letter she wrote, accusing the UK Home Office of institutional racism in this respect of not taking seriously anti-white hate crime, especially. So when you're convicting someone from a grooming gang and they say, I raped her because she's a white S-word or a effing kafar, non-believer, well, okay, if this was any other way around, we would say this is a hate crime and the government isn't. So she made that. The Home Office has responded, which is just the next link we have here. So they responded in here, but they didn't really address Ella's points in this response, which I found weird, like her points about hate crime. So she's issued a second response, which should be the next link here, and we're going to go through that because she's done some digging, and being the smart cookie she is, she's really found some stuff here, and we're going to go through it and assess it. So, in this, we're going to be talking about hate crimes and non-crime hate incidences, which in the UK are used as a measure of intolerance, in case you're wondering. I asked a police officer this personally, and he said, yeah, that's the reason we do it, to measure intolerance, which... yeah, okay, then you have to measure the intolerance of every group, sure.
And for what purpose? You're keeping records on your degree of intolerance. Why? For what purpose? Well, ultimately...
The government tells them to, and the government of the day that made this happen was Tony Blair's government, the Marxist government. So, yeah. So, just for the links, so this is very quick. We have the first link here, which is just the population stats. So that's where we're getting population from the government. Next one here is the hate crime stats, which again are from the government. And then the third one here is a parliamentary report from the government. So that's where all of the information is coming from if you want to find out these specific screenshots in your own time, or you can go to the article on lotuses.com and get the links from there without further ado. So if we go back to the article, this is Ella Hill saying in here, so she argues, I am writing in response to your kind letter dated 19th of May. Thank you for acknowledging that grooming gang crime is hate crime, but the Home Office still hasn't addressed my complaint about racial and religious discrimination, outlined in my open letter dated 19th of April. The institutional racism and religious discrimination that I have experienced from police, CPS, media, counselling services, the BBC, and hate crime services, outlined in my previous letter, all stems from the biased practices and misleading documents produced by the Home Office Hate Crime Unit. Hate Crime Unit here being the wokest part of the Home Office. I mean, no surprise there.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, what a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for people who would be rabid wokists, the people who work in the Hate Crime Office.
Isn't it just another symptom of the upside-down world, the clown world, various things people want to say, just the inversion,
of morality.
The subversion of anything and everything, and it's at the most core level, like you say, where they've infiltrated the very intelligence services, the hate crime unit of the Home Office.
Yeah. I mean, my opinion's always long been that this shouldn't really exist, but if it is going to exist, as Ella points out correctly, well, if it does exist, then it needs to do its job properly, and its job properly would be perpetrating against hate crime, people who commit hate crimes on all spectrums, whether or not it's against black people,
not doing
or
that?
White people, or so on and so forth. So that's what she argues that they're not doing.
But it's... Oh, okay.
So, she says, for years now, the Home Office hate reports and House of Commons briefing papers are deeply statistically flawed, racially and religious discriminatory, and demonstrate a harmful left-wing political ideological bias. So, point one she makes, the way the race hate data is presented deliberately hides the fact that the largest proportion of race hate crimes in England and Wales are anti-white hate crimes, over 41%. So if we go to the first image here, so this is the first piece of data they show here. So this is what you find in the report, and as you can see, it's percentage of adults over age 16 who were victims of racially motivated hate crime, and then it has the weightings. It doesn't give you a percentage per group. And in the white section there, it's 0.1. So
what?
0.1% of the white population of England and Wales over 2 years will be victims of a hate crime.
Oh, well, that seems very low.
So, yeah, that's how they present it. You can see it's higher for every other group there. And so this is what you'd get from it. If you're a layman or just a minister or anyone else and you saw what the Home Office, civil servants have brought you, okay, yeah, white hate crime seems to be very low, the lowest, in fact, so therefore not really worthy.
It appears there's hardly any hate crime being committed against white people.
Yeah, so she, because you can take this number and you can just run it backwards and then see what the actual numbers were that they're hiding from you,
right.
And she did. So if we can get the next image up, this is as you list the hidden data of those over age 16 who were victims of racially motivated hate crime. As you can see there, the white weighting, census data, so then you make the approximate number of crimes, and then there you go, 41% of hate crimes committed in England and Wales over 2 years were against white people.
So to show it as a weighting percentage is just a cheap statistical trick.
Well, it's a useful piece of data because you want to show what number of people in the
But
category.
to represent it like that, just like that, that's
What's
just cheap.
misleading is to just have the weighting and nothing else.
Right, yeah.
When you know that's not the full story.
Right.
And they'll do the reverse later on. They'll show the percentage but not the weighting, and there'll be the obvious reason for that. And you might be thinking, well, okay, white people in 2010, out-of-date data, but it's the best we have, 87% of the population of Britain were classified as white, whereas only 41% of the victims of hate crimes are white. Therefore, they're underrepresented and whatnot. That doesn't really make sense when you think about it, though, because you've got to think, well, 14% of the population are non-white, and presumably white people aren't committing hate crimes against each other on the basis of being white. I mean, this is racially motivated hate crime, not ethnically motivated hate crime.
Right.
So we're not looking at English people who hate Polish people and are committing a hate crime.
Right.
We're looking at non-white people who attack white people. So 14% of the population, the non-white population, are committing 41% of the hate crimes. Those against white people there. And the Home Office chose to not include that statistic and instead just include the weightings. So 0.1% of all white people are hate crime victims within 2 years.
So to do that just speaks to me of just a dirty, underhanded use of statistics.
I mean,
Deliberately misleading.
If you are a wokist in the Home Office, this is what you would do. And they did do this. And I don't know why you'd have any other argument for not including the full data, as Ella has calculated here, except ideological. So she's not wrong that that's disgusting that they left that out there. It's just the case. But yeah, okay. And you can guess what the reasons are, obviously. So if we go on to the next image, so this is another section they have in here, in which they say that victims of racist hate crimes in London in the 12 months from June 2017, those of black ethnicity constituted the largest proportion, 30% of all victims who have suffered racist hate crime, following those of Asian and white North European descent being 25% each. So in London, 25% of the victims are white North European, 25% Asian, 30% black, and therefore it's showing you here that black people are the most victimized group of hate crimes. She says, there's also been a cherry-picking of the data from high black ethnicity population areas of England, where there are proportionally more anti-black hate crime, 30%, compared to the national average of 15%, which was hidden from us in the report. Didn't list the fact that nationally it's 15, so raising it up there. The national anti-white hate crime percentage, which is the highest overall percentage of race hate crime, 41%, so the largest group nationally. This has been deliberately, completely omitted from the report. And the data is deliberately skewed to deceive readers into thinking that anti-white hate crime is a much smaller problem nationally, which is not true.
Right, so you've got lying by omission there, you've got cherry picking, you've just got the sort of untruthful use of statistics, really, across the board. All against white people from our own Home Office. Why, though? It's odd, isn't it?
I mean, we know wokeness.
Just virtual signalling wokeness. Is that it? Can that be? Is there
it's
anything more sinister than that?
It's not just virtue signalling. They're promoting a ideological worldview here,
Okay.
And they've done it as we did our last podcast on within the military. They've done it within the RAF. They've done it within the security
Everywhere.
services. Why would they not do it in the hate crimes unit? I mean, why does the hate crime unit even exist? Because of these kind of people. One other thing she doesn't mention, but Carl brought up when she mentioned all this, was localization is something to be important here. So this 41% is 41% nationally of all hate crimes. But you got to think, in Devon, how many white-on-white hate crimes are there, or non-white-on-white hate crimes?
Right, yeah.
Well, there's no racial diversity. You're not going to get racial hate crimes across racial lines because it just can't happen. That doesn't make any logical sense. So in which case, that 41% only accounts for racially diverse areas. And in which case, you're not looking at comparing 41% to the national average of 87% white. You're looking at comparing it to what is that percentage of white people in those racially diverse areas.
Right, so in a place that is very racially diverse, somewhere in Birmingham or Ilford, Stratford, something like that in London.
What's the percentage of white
people?
people?
It's just white people having hate crimes
committed against them
on a large scale, on a massive scale.
It's not happening in Devon and Cornwall,
right?
So it's going to be happening there. In which case, what's the percentage of white people in Peckham? We don't know because they don't give the data, but that's something that is not considered at all. So the next image here is image 4. So this is the sentencing data. So she mentions the report doesn't have categories for hate crimes targeted against someone's, quote, lack of religion or, quote, lack of religious belief. This omission is clear religious discrimination against victims targeted for having a perceived lack of religious belief. This includes grooming gang victims. Certainly does. When the groomers are saying, you're an effing kafir, you're a non-believer, you're a non-Muslim, therefore it's okay to rape you, That's discrimination. That's them committing a hate crime on the basis of you not believing. And in case you're wondering, yes, in the UK, we have rules on this sort of thing, as she links in the current legislation about this sort of thing. References to religious groups are to a group of persons defined by reference to religious belief or lack of religious belief. So it's not just being an atheist, but if the chap who's attacking you attacks you because you don't believe in his belief, because you don't believe in anything, that's a hate crime. And that is not listed in the hate crime data we have in the UK. The hate crime unit doesn't collect data on lack of religious belief, even though the legislation around this entire topic says that you must.
That's interesting. I wonder why they would do that. I wonder why they'd take that angle.
Interesting, isn't it?
Just to minimise, like, you know, apostasy. If you leave, if you're an apostate, if you leave the religion.
If you leave Islam, the punishment in Islam is death.
Yeah.
So if someone goes around and kills you for leaving Islam, is that a hate crime?
Right, that's going to be my question.
According to the Home Office, no.
Okay.
So we go to the next one here. So this is another point she makes here. So you see the switcheroo, in which they present the data that is most favourable to the wokest position. So this is a data table showing the number of religious motivated hate crimes that are recorded to the police. As you can see there, Muslim listed as 50% of all hate crimes over the year that's given. So 50% of all hate crimes in that year are against Muslims. And what would you construe from that? Well, Muslims are a very oppressed group in the UK. Look how much they're being attacked for their religious beliefs. How horrible is this? Except, no. The way that the religious hate crime data is presented emphasizes the overall proportion of recorded hate crime against people who are perceived to be Muslim, 50%. This has the effect of disproportionately inflating the suffering by false statistical comparison of Muslim hate crime victims. Might sound rough, but it's true. So if you give us the next slide here, this is her data, because of course you have to take into account the per capita, how many hate crimes per capita of Muslims. So if you go to the next slide, John, this is up here. So then she's done exactly this. She's taken the number from the last slide. She's taken the census data from the government of how many Muslims are in the UK. Weighting, 0.1%. A Muslim is as likely to be a victim of hate crime as a white person on average throughout the country.
Right.
Home Office says that. Home Office data. No one else's. As you can see there, Jewish, as for them, 5 times more likely than a Muslim to be targeted for their religious belief, according to the Home Office. Something that was not clear in the previous graph. Instead, it was like 19% of them are Jewish.
Is there a breakdown if it's Muslim on Muslim, you know, like the Shia Sunni when they battle each other in the streets and things? Or is it's just assumed that it's white people committing
It's assumed that it's
Muslim?
non-Muslims attacking Muslims, because
Right, okay.
that sort of data, too much for the Home Office, I guess. So she mentions in here, the report hides the fact that weighting anti-Muslim hate crimes is only 0.1% of the population of Muslim who are victims, which is the same weighting as anti-white hate crimes as listed by the Home Office. So when someone comes to you, Home Office, and says, oh, look at this data, 50% of all victims of hate crimes are Muslims, you must give Telmama millions of pounds or whatever. No. Like, they're just giving you a skewed data in the hopes that you will be misled. And, well, that is what the hate crime unit presumably did in their writings here, in which they sent to the parliamentary inquiry. Interesting.
I mean,
do that.
do they think that the average person is stupid or can't read or can't use a calculator or something? What do they think? Who do they think they're
no one's
kidding?
going to bother reading it.
Right.
And
Okay.
and going in there. But people like Ella Hill exist, and she's done a good job. So if we go to the next one here,
good for
this is just
her.
the next link. This is amazing. The report says, Ella says, the report says that data for anti-Muslim terrorist attacks is included as hate crime, including Finsbury Park mosque attack, but not data for religiously aggravated attacks carried out by Muslims against people perceived to be non-Muslims, including the Manchester Arena bombing. This is clearly religious discrimination against the victims who are targeted for, quote, lack of Muslim belief. And the quote from the Home Office here, some terrorist attacks may be targeted against the general British or Western values rather than one of the 5 specific strands. Attacks of this nature are therefore not covered by the statistical bulletin, although they were clearly motivated by hate. However, other terrorist attacks are motivated by a hatred towards one centrally monitored motivated against one of the centrally monitored hate crime strands covered by this statistical bulletin. For example, the Finsbury Park mosque attack in 2017 has been classed as a hate crime. So for people who don't know, Finsbury Park mosque attack was after a series of Islamically-inspired terrorist attacks. A guy went in his van who hated Muslims and drove down some Muslim guys at Finsbury Park mosque. And that's classified as a hate crime because he's clearly targeting them because of being Muslim. That's true. Everything, there is by the books. But in those terrorist attacks that came before, so London Bridge, if a guy goes on London Bridge and he's Muslim and he shouts Allah Akbar, death to Kafirs, and then drives his van into a bunch of non-believers, that's not a hate crime because he's targeting the general British, or he is against Western values. So says the Home Office.
So it's hard at this kind of point, to view them as anything other than working directly against our interests. I mean, that's simply what's going on. The Finsbury Park mosque attack is a hate crime, and Manchester Arena wasn't. What on earth?
I mean, I like using the example of London Bridge there, because, I mean, it's literally, almost exactly the same. Guy in a van running down people on the sidewalk. In one instance, it's a non-Muslim running down Muslims, and in the other instance, it's Muslims running down non-Muslims. One is a hate crime, one is not.
But again, this thing that if it's against one of the 5 specific strands, I don't even know really what that means or anything. It's nonsense, isn't it?
Gender, religious belief, sexuality, so on and so forth.
Yeah, nonsense. So it just doesn't really seem to make any sense. It's like a very cheap, simplistic word trick that they're trying to play on you to justify some nonsense. No?
I mean, this is wokeist strategy 101.
I mean, it's not that complicated or deep or anything, though. It's sort of right in your face, isn't it?
Yeah, anyone who actually reads it, I mean, like we're presenting here, and like Ella made us aware, thank you, Ella, it's absurd. But we'll go to the next one here. So the next one here is when we look at offenders by ethnicity. So this is an image showing the percentage of offenders by ethnicity, and this is accurate data they present here. So it is the data they have, which is, so in 2012, 87% of offenders were white, 4.8% were black, and then 4.3% were Asian. These are offenders, so the people committing the crimes. And then in 2016, because of demographic shift, presumably, 83% of them are white, 7.4% are black, and 6.4% are Asian. So it's the white percentage there is pretty much in line with what you would expect the white population to be. White population is about 87% white in 2010, and therefore, as it slowly goes down because of demographic shift, presumably, it's in line with that. But at the same time as they present this, they see that, the biggest group committing hate crimes are white people. A big shock. Most people in the UK are white. What's of interest in this sort of thing is the disproportionality, something that they don't make clear. So Ella says, this report shows old data for perpetrators' race 2012-2016 presented in a way that makes white perpetrators look as bad as possible. The report hides the fact that the worst ethnic group weighting for convictions of hate crime in 2019 is black at 0.01% compared to 0.00% for all other ethnicities. This choice of data presentation shows racial discrimination that attempts to make white perpetrators look as most likely to commit racially or religiously aggravated hate crimes, which is not true. Black perpetrators are. That's a fact, no matter how you feel about it. If we do the next link here. So this is just the convictions. Again, Home Office data by ethnicity. And then Ella's done the good work here in the next one, which is just of her listing the weightings. And as you can see, for the offenders, the weightings here, 0.01% of the black community are hate crime offenders in any given year. That's the data. That's raw data. No arguing with it. If you want to know the white percentage, because it only went to 2 6 figs, was a half of that. So, and for whites, it was 0.00469, if we want to go to a large number of significant figures there. But it's half the percentage. And yet, the presentation that the Home Office gave was, look, white people are being the most ones who are being offenders. It's not accurate. It's just not accurate. It's
what
it's
weirdo
them.
freak traitors? Why are they doing that? Why?
We know
I don't
why.
get it.
But there's also the thing there, the 0.01%, I must make clear, it is small, it is very small, but it is statistically significant. That is why it's worth looking at. There's no, I don't want to give anyone the impression that black people are all hate crime offenders or something like that in case someone's drinking paint thinner isn't thinking. It's 0.01% of the population of blacks in the UK are convicted of hate crime every single year. But it is much lower for whites, and why did the Home Office misrepresent those results? So, if we go to the next one, someone mentioned, not all hate crimes are equal in their weight. That's a true statement. Someone saying mean words to you online is not the same as someone raping you because of your skin tone. Simple as. However, this is what was presented by the Home Office in their report about hate crimes. And as you can see here, sexual offences that are, the full list of hate crimes by the prosecution, category for offence. You can see sexual offences 0.2%. So Ella says in here, only 0.2% of the prosecuted hate crimes are sexual assaults, which confirms what we have been told. Police and CPS have not been trained to record or prosecute sexual assaults as racially or religiously aggravated offences, whilst they have been actively encouraged to prescribe public disorder offences and online communications as racially and religiously aggravated offences, so someone's mean words on Twitter. When multiple sexual offences are prosecuted as racially aggravated, they are often only charged as one single rape. So, 100 rape counts are the same as one hate crime. This is unfair, putting it mildly. So if one girl is raped by 100 men, I mean, we saw recently, 52 men, it was 29 men or something like that, were all convicted of raping one girl. Well, that's one rape, because that's one girl. And that's equal to one mean tweet in the data. So that's something to keep in mind. Because remember, when we're talking about the grooming gang situation, we're not talking about mean tweets. We're talking about rapes. She finishes off here by saying, the combined effects of these factors, and then she lists all the factors, it's too long to read right now, but there's all of them in there, you can read in the own article, proves that there has been a deliberate institutional cover-up of grooming gang crime for the past 14 years. So her argument is that the hate crime unit, the wokest unit in the Home Office, presents data in a way to admit stark data points, such as Muslims being just at risk of being victims as the average white person.
To omit them.
Yeah, to omit them. Or the most likely perpetrator of a hate crime is a black male. Why are they admitting these things? Well, ideology.
Well, that's what I was asking before, just very quickly. You say, well, we know why, because of sort of the wokest ideology. But does that fully explain it? It just to my mind, it doesn't seem to fully explain it. It seems like there's something even more perverse going on psychologically in the minds of these permanent secretaries and the civil servants that work at the Home Office.
So we have
something more
we have a few
weird
supporters who work at the civil service, and everything they tell me is the entire thing is woke as heck, and it really does influence everything they do, which is why they're so awful. Wow. So her central argument being that they're emitting all this data, and this helps the grooming gangs by hiding the level of anti-white or anti-non-believer kuffar hate crimes, many of which the Home Office admits or doesn't even take record of. I mean, for example, the terrorism instance there. If I bomb someone tomorrow after converting to Islam, that's not a hate crime because I'm attacking the general public. But if I don't convert, that is a hate crime. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, also the point of excluding under 16s. Very valid point by Ella. Most of the grooming gang victims are under 16, in which case if they are convicted, the men, when the victim is 14, well, they're not put down as a victim of a hate crime, even though they've been raped for their race and religion. And also the admission of lack of belief crime. If someone is not a Muslim and they are raped by a Muslim man who rapes them because he believes raping non-Muslims is okay, he's not committing a hate crime, according to the Home Office. Whereas if the opposite was true, of course it would be a hate crime. She's just correct on this, and I look forward to the Home Office response. Defend yourselves, because this is awful.
If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 PM UK time on lotuseaters.com.